Hey, welcome to Thursday. I'm Soledad O'Brien.
And I'm Miles O'Brien. Here's a look at what's happening this morning. It is Thursday, May 11th, and there's more violence in the troubled southwestern portion of Pakistan. A series of bombings this morning at a police training school. 6 officers dead, a dozen more injured. Unclear who is responsible, but tribes there are pushing for more autonomy and a greater share of oil revenue. A $70 billion tax cut package, all but in the mail this morning. The Senate endorsement expected later today. The bill passed the House yesterday. It would extend the lower tax rate for capital gains and dividends for 2 more years and make changes to the alternative minimum tax.
An ethics investigation dropped. The ethics office of the Justice Department was looking into just who approved the National Security Agency's domestic surveillance program. Well, that probe is now dropped because investigators were denied security clearances. President Bush goes to Biloxi today. He's giving the commencement address at Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College. About 3,000 students left the college in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina.
Another step in the long road home for thousands of homeowners in New Orleans. They could get more money to rebuild. Louisiana lawmakers have approved Governor Kathleen Blanco's $7.5 million hurricane aid program. But the plan relies on billions of dollars in federal assistance, and that is still tied up in Congress. An old-fashioned posse is on the hunt for illegal immigrants southwest of Phoenix. The Maricopa County Sheriff taking matters into his own hands. Typically, the Federal Border Patrol has jurisdiction, but a new Arizona state law allows the sheriff and his posse to pick up border crossers on state smuggling charges.
A dusk till dawn curfew is in effect in Westminster, Texas. That's north of Dallas. The area, of course, devastated by tornadoes. 3 people died. More than 24 homes were destroyed. Westminster has been declared now a disaster area. In Florida, a 12-mile stretch of Interstate 95 now closed indefinitely between Edgewater and Port Orange. Workers say they need time to clear the trees that were damaged by the brush fires that are starting to now fall across that highway. Let's get right to a forecast this morning. Chad Myers is at the CNN Center. Chad, where do you want to start? In Florida there?
Yeah, we'll start in Florida because there's just a big wave of rain that's headed to them, and that's some help to stop the fires. But also with that wave of rain will also probably be a wave of wind. Here's the rain, heavy rain now about Panama City all the way over to Sandestin. Farther to the east, though, where the burn area is, that's where the rain is now coming in from Gainesville into central Florida. They'll take all the rain that Mother Nature can give, though. It's been so very dry. Been wet up here across the upper Midwest into parts of Michigan, wet and cold. Some rain showers into central Pennsylvania, but for the most part, that's just some light rain. Here comes the wave after wave of rain headed into parts of Florida. The storms are really dying at this hour. They were severe in the overnight. 14 reports of tornadoes yesterday. There won't be nearly as many, I don't think, today. There may be some cold air funnels here, not really big tornadoes, just small little rope-type tornadoes in the Midwest, and then the strongest weather actually in the mid-Atlantic states there, because that's where the warmest weather will be. Temperatures in the 70s and a few temperatures in the 80s along the Outer Banks and lower Alabama. Back to you guys.
Thanks, Chad. Back with you in just a little bit. Let's get back to the destruction in Texas. Some residents north of Dallas now have the daunting task of trying to rebuild after their homes were wiped out by those tornadoes we told you about yesterday first. CNN's Rob Marciano takes a look at how some people rode out the storm.
Some of the survivor stories coming out of Westminster, Texas are truly amazing. Here in the pantry of their home, a couple huddled together as the storm rolled through. Look how this tornado ripped their entire home off its foundation and piled it up on the other end over top of their garage. 2x4s, studded walls here. I mean, this is a newly constructed home. Strong home, to give you an essence of how strong this tornado was. Here's the water heater. Now we're into the garage, which was obviously damaged in the car here, pretty much totaled. They had a pickup truck in the driveway that's about 300 yards over into a ditch, did several barrel rolls. Well, the cleanup effort here continues. The good news here, obviously, that they survived miraculously, and there's several of those survival stories here out of this tornado. But behind me, not only this home, but another home completely wiped off its foundation. Friends and family gather and continue to pick up the pieces and at least pile up the rubble so that the people who live in these homes can come back and sift through some of their personal property. But the storms, at least for now, have moved on to the east. Reporting from Westminster, Texas, I'm Rob Marciano.
Sad situation there. Let's get to a CNN security watch this morning. It is being described as the largest database ever assembled in the world, and your phone number is probably on it. USA Today is reporting new details of the National Security Agency's program to secretly collect phone call records. The program's been up and running ever since 9/11. The spy agency says they're trying to detect terrorist activity. Here are some details. The report does say that the program doesn't involve listening to your calls, just keeping a log of who you're calling. AT&T, Verizon, Bell South are all part of the program. Quest refused to participate. The paper says the NSA program is far broader than even what the White House has ever acknowledged. A new report out this morning finds that British intelligence may have missed a chance to stop the London transit bombings. It says British intelligence services were monitoring two of the bombers, decided, though, to focus their resources elsewhere. The July 7th bombings were Britain's largest terror attack. 52 people were killed when suicide bombers targeted 3 subway cars and a bus. Let's get right to Paula Hancock this morning. She's live outside the King's Cross station in London. That, of course, was the site of one of the bombings. Hey, Paula, good morning.
Hello, Soledad. Well, they decided in this particular report that no single agency and no single individual was to blame. This is what we were expecting. What the report does say to blame for not preventing the July 7th attacks was a lack of resources. The fact there weren't enough people to deal with the amount of threats that were coming through. They say that between 2003 and 2005, the amount of targets, potential threats, and potential organizations trying to organize a terrorist activity had risen 300%. So they're basically saying that the sheer number of threats and the lack of people is why they couldn't stop this particular attack. Soledad.
How much did British intelligence officials know about the suspects, if anything, before the attacks, Paula?
They had been watching 2 of these suspects, the ringleader Mohammed Sadiq Khan and also one of his fellow suicide bombers, Shazid Tanweer. They say that they had watched them in relation to other operations. They thought they were on the periphery of a potential operation which they were focusing on. They claim that they did not know the identity of these 2 men before the attacks, and also the fact that they were focusing on other operations. The committee, the report finds this understandable. They say there was such a sheer number of threats and they were prioritizing. The security services believed that other potential threats at that time were more important. They didn't think that these 2 men were a threat.
So what's the overall assessment, Paula? What does the report sort of give a final word on the terror alert system overall in Britain?
The terror alert system, certainly, it's very convoluted over here. Just before these attacks, the terror alert system had actually been lowered from severe general to substantial. Now, it's very difficult to understand. This report is saying it should be really more like the American system. The fact it's easy for the public to understand, it's color-coded, but over here it's very convoluted. Different security services and different agencies don't necessarily follow the same one, so they're saying that there should be a more coherent system and they should talk to each other more.
That's interesting that they think the one here is a little easier to understand than the one where you are, because I think a lot of people here aren't sure how the system really works. But that's a debate for another day. Paula Hancock's for us this morning. Paula, thanks. You want to stay tuned, of course, to CNN day and night for the most reliable news about your security. Miles?
Still more questions and answers days after that rampage at the police station in the Virginia suburbs of D.C. On Monday, 18-year-old Michael Kennedy opened fire on police in a parking lot during a shift change. One officer critically injured, another killed. Flowers and stuffed animals surround the car of the dead officer, and the station house remains closed this week. Yesterday, police found an arsenal of weapons inside Kennedy's home. Kennedy was killed in the ensuing shootout there. More emotion in a Rhode Island courtroom, not from the victims of that nightclub fire, but from the man held responsible. A judge sentenced the former band manager Daniel Beakley to 4 years in prison yesterday. He set off the pyrotechnics that sparked the fire at the station nightclub in 2003. CNN's Alan Chernoff at the courthouse in Providence.
Family members of the victims poured out of court right after the sentence was announced, some deeply disappointed and others believing that indeed the sentence was fair. Dan Beakley received a sentence of 4 years in prison. He was the band manager who lit the pyrotechnics that triggered the fire that burnt down the nightclub and killed 100 people. There's no question that Beakley was contrite. He had written apology letters to the families, and in court he begged for mercy.
I don't know that I'll ever forgive myself for what happened that night, so I can't expect anybody else to.